In the summer of 2026, officials in some of America's biggest cities, cities that had already committed hundreds of millions of dollars to host World Cup matches, found themselves pitching sponsorship deals to local dry cleaners and mechanics. Not because they wanted small-time sponsors, because FIFA's own commercial contracts blocked them from doing deals with anyone bigger. Sell space to a convenience store chain, and you're suddenly competing with FIFA's official partners, companies like McDonald's. For category exclusivity, FIFA itself controls. At the exact same time, FIFA's president was telling reporters the tournament would clear more than $15 billion. That's the 2026 World Cup in one image. An organization sitting on the most profitable tournament in its history, while the cities that paid to host it were scrounging for sponsors from the used car lot down the street. By the time the final whistle blew at MetLife Stadium on July 19th, the numbers had told a very consistent story. 11 U.S. host cities were facing a collective shortfall of at least $250 million. Washington State's own agencies projected they'd spend $24 million more hosting matches than they'd recover in tax revenue. And during the exact month the tournament's economic models promised a tourism surge, U.S. leisure and hospitality employment fell by 61,000 jobs. So, how does the biggest sporting event on the planet turn a profit for everyone except the country that paid to host it? The easy answer is that hosting mega events is always expensive. Stadiums, security, transportation, that's just the cost of doing business. And it's not exactly a secret. That's true as far as it goes. But it doesn't explain why the expense and the revenue are so cleanly separated, why one side of this deal walks away with record profit and the other side walks away with a bill. That separation isn't an accident of scale, it's a structure FIFA has been building, contract by contract, since the last time the US hosted this tournament. Go back to 1994. That was the first time FIFA brought the World Cup to the United States, and it is also the year FIFA secured something that has quietly shaped every US World Cup bid since: tax-exempt status. Not a one-time courtesy, a standing arrangement. FIFA has operated free of federal tax in the US and free of state tax in nearly every hosting jurisdiction ever since. Only Washington State has ever been the exception. That precedent became the opening term in every negotiation that followed. When cities lined up to bid for 2026 hosting rights, FIFA's requirements weren't limited to stadium specs and hotel room counts. They came with tax concessions attached as a condition of eligibility, not a request, a requirement. Cities that balked walked away. Minneapolis, Chicago, and Glendale, Arizona all dropped out of the running in 2018 specifically because FIFA's demands for tax breaks and funding assistance were part of the deal. The cities that stayed in the race were the ones willing to write those concessions into law before they had even been picked. Florida and Georgia's governors signed legislation eliminating sales tax on World Cup tickets months before either state was confirmed as a host. Missouri did the same. All three ended up hosting matches. That is not a coincidence, it is what the bidding process selected for. Here's the mechanism once the tournament actually happens. FIFA's revenue for the 2026 cycle depends on which week you ask. The number moved from an early projection of $8.9 billion to $9 billion to $11 billion, and by the time Infantino spoke after the final, he was citing more than $15 billion for the full 4-year commercial cycle. That volatility is itself worth noticing. This is not a fixed number FIFA is reporting. It is a number FIFA keeps revising upward in public, in real time as the tournament plays out. Whatever the final audited figure turns out to be, the overwhelming majority of it comes from 3 sources. FIFA controls outright: broadcast rights, sponsorship deals, and ticketing and hospitality revenue sold through FIFA's own marketplace. All three of those categories are structured so the money flows to FIFA first, not to the host cities. Now look at the other side of the ledger. Hosting cities were looking at $100 million to $200 million each in direct costs, security, transit, staffing, infrastructure. Some ran far higher. Los Angeles alone was projected near $594 million once every cost category was counted. New York and New Jersey, hosting the final, were looking at roughly $500 million combined. Added up across North America, and you are past $12 billion in hosting costs against FIFA's own multi-billion-dollar profit margin sitting on the other side of the same tournament. Then there is the tax side specifically. Florida, Georgia, and Missouri. Together, waived at least $57.8 million in state and local sales tax on tickets and tournament transactions. Georgia's share of that alone ran as high as $25 million. That's not a broad economic incentive with some public benefit attached. FIFA required the exemption as a condition of hosting. It is baked into the price of admission to the tournament, and the state does not get it back, regardless of what else the tournament does or does not deliver. And FIFA did not stop at protecting its own revenue. In April 2026, after months of lobbying, FIFA got the US Treasury to agree that the 48 participating national federations could apply for tax-exempt status under Section 501(c)(3), the same tax code section built for charities. That means most of the prize money paid to national federations, including the $50 million paid to Spain's federation for winning, largely escapes federal tax too. The individual players do not get that protection. The federations do. Every host city's bid was built on a promise. Yes, this costs money up front, but the tourism and spending surge pays it back. That's the part that hasn't held up, and it hasn't held up for decades, not just this tournament. Sports economist Andrew Zimbalist has said plainly that economic impact studies for events like this are invariably overstated because the organizations commissioning them have a financial interest in the number coming out big. Researchers Robert Bade and Victor Matheson went back and checked the 1994 US World Cup, specifically the same tournament that established FIFA's tax-exempt status in the first place, and found its actual economic impact landed somewhere between $5.5 billion and $9.3 billion short of what was promised before the tournament happened. A separate analysis pulling GDP data from every World Cup since 1982 found hosting produces what researchers call a marginally positive but statistically insignificant bump in real output. In plain language, a bump too small to actually measure. 2026 tracked the same pattern in real time. During the group stage, the exact window when FIFA's own models predicted a wave of international visitors, U.S. international arrivals were essentially flat, up just 0.2% year over year, and actually down from both Europe and Asia specifically, the two regions that normally account for the bulk of overseas visitors. The month the tournament kicked off, U.S. leisure and hospitality employment didn't rise. It fell by 61,000 jobs. None of this is one problem, it's three, hitting host cities at the same time. First, the contract structure itself locks cities out of the tournament's most valuable revenue before a single ticket sells. Sponsorship exclusivity clauses block deals with anything from a convenience store chain up, broadcast, and ticketing revenue flows straight to FIFA, and none of it is structured to share back. Second, the tax concessions that got cities into the bidding process in the first place are sunk costs, non-refundable regardless of outcome. Georgia does not get its $25 million back if the tourism surge underdelivers. The exemption was the price of admission, paid up front, whether or not the promised return shows up later. Third, and this is the one that should worry city officials the most going forward, the offsetting benefit that was supposed to make all of this worthwhile isn't showing up in the actual economic data, not in arrivals, not in hospitality employment, not in the independent research stretching back over 3 decades of World Cups. None of this makes FIFA's business model illegal or even unusual by the standards of how mega events get sold to host cities. The Olympics run on nearly identical economics, so does the Super Bowl. The pattern is well documented, well researched, and apparently not well remembered because cities keep signing up for the same deal. The next World Cup bid cycle will come around eventually, with new officials in new cities hearing the same billion-dollar projections that Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Kansas City heard this time. The economics will not have changed. The only real question is whether anyone bidding for it will have been paying attention to what just happened here.